So thanks very much for inviting me to give this short talk. It's a bit of a primer for what's coming up, which is a main launch event. And it's almost as if this whole thing has been planned and programmed. Who knew? Firstly, an apology for the shameless theft of images that's going to go through this presentation, and apology to Richard, I did shamelessly steal a couple of images from your report as well. So apprenticeships, well, there's a challenge here in acoustics that Matthew alluded to as well. There were two things that have struck me. One over the whole course of my career, and the second one more recently. Well, the first one is a feeling that there seemed to be a lack of awareness of acoustics as a career path amongst young people. I certainly didn't realise that there was such an industry until I was 21 and after I'd finished a mechanical engineering degree. Very much like music, found something that was maths and sound all in the same place, so bingo. And that the old adage, I fell into acoustics, I've heard that quite a lot from around the industry, so that was clear. That's clear, and we're all aware of this. But there's another thing that I've noticed over the last 15 years of doing this, is that we do have a future challenge, and Matthew alluded to it, of not enough people. Acoustics is becoming more and more prevalent in our society, in our consciousness. People are talking about acoustics more. I was watching last episode of Black Mirror the other day. I don't know if anyone's seen that last episode, Miley Cyrus in it. At one point she says, "Oh, have you played that theatre? Oh, the acoustics are bad, aren't they?" It's in popular culture now. People are starting to know what it is, and also people are starting to realise the effects of good acoustics and bad acoustics on our health and well-being. So all of that came together, and I thought to myself, is there actually a clear path into this industry? Is it obvious, clear and obvious, for how you do this and how you can get into it if it's something you love? And can you work towards it? Well, every challenge needs a response. And a response sort of came along. I mean, once upon a time, there was a Prime Minister who said education, education, education. I've always thought, well, so what about practical application? Because ultimately you have to take everything you learn and apply it somehow. But then along comes George Osborne in 2015, announcing apprenticeships during his budget speech and introducing a 0.5% tax levy on company payroll above 3 million. Now, legend has it, George said this without any warning to his junior ministers. That's the legend. It's not corroborated, don't quote me. But I like the story that suddenly there's a lot of junior ministers back in their offices watching this budget and thinking, right, we're going to have to set about actually making this happen now. Thanks, George. But also on the same day he was given his GCSE maths qualification. So I was really, really, really proud of him that day. So about a year later, this sort of started bubbling to the surface a bit, the idea of apprenticeships. We sat in a room at the ANC meeting and mentioned, a couple of us said, well, isn't this an opportunity for us to sort of formulate a way into acoustics? And lots of people nodded around the table. And we said, right, well then let's set about setting this up. Who's in? And lots of people nodded around the table again. And that was great, because there was a general feeling that something like this was going to come about eventually, and it just felt like those two worlds met all at the same time, all at the right time, and now here we are on this journey about 3 years in. There's a big gulf between the inception and when our standard was accepted, and you can see the gateways. That's the route to getting an apprenticeship through. That's how the Institute for Apprenticeships have set it up. First of all, you have to convince government that your subject is a going concern. And God, we would have really benefited from that report 3 years ago. So instead, I just had to use whatever powers of persuasion I could muster. And eventually, after a good couple of years of discussion with government, we got it through the first gateway. The first response I did get was, we do not believe that acoustics is an industry of its own. And that was coming from the very people who were trying to run this. So that was an absolute shocker, but if anything, energised us even more to actually get this moving, because it's obvious it needed something. Then we had our standard accepted, and very rapidly after that we developed a standard alongside London South Bank University, also drawing from other standards. As Richard said, why reinvent the wheel? There were others that came before us, building services, nail technician. These are all actual apprenticeships, and they're all actual businesses. So we just took as much as we could in terms of the structure and the overall skeleton, and input acoustics into it. And after we had that accepted, we were all very pleased with ourselves, patted ourselves on the back, but then somebody turned to us and said, well, actually you need an endpoint assessment as well, and you need to work out how much this is going to cost. So onwards we went, and finally we are through all of the gateways. All of this information, endpoint assessment, standards, the costings, it's all available on the IFA website. If you search in Google Acoustics Apprenticeships, it'll be the first one on there. And so this coming year, 2020, we're launching, and we're hoping for the first intake of apprentices, and then 2 years later we'll be looking at the first graduation. I'll go through what all that means shortly. It's a very quick rundown. I have to give credit to the whole Trailblazer group. I call these guys the survivors, because this is a much bigger group beforehand. So a lot of people here have contributed in one way or another. Either they're in this room or they're in the industry. Basically, this 6 are various people who have connections within the ANC, connections with the Institute of Acoustics, and can bridge that gap between those two. But also we took a lot of advice from the Technician Apprenticeship Consortium and Institute for Apprenticeships, both of whom were instrumental in getting us this far. So very, very pleased to have been able to herd those cats, so to speak. So I was looking for an image. Part of my theft begins here. I was looking for an image to just summarize what an apprenticeship is, because I knew it. We all know what it is intuitively. You work and you learn, and you earn money and you learn, right? But actually it's a lot more than that. You go to school, you study, you get access to a career, you get skills, your motivation goes up, you belong somewhere. And also you have goals, but all alongside this you're able to have a job. And there are apprentices in our company on the building services side who after 3 years have got a better CV than I did after 6. So they've really they get thrown in the deep end as well, and it's great because they get their learning and their work. This is not to say that there's no place for pure academia or pure work. Let's just say this is a new path into acoustics, just an alternative route. And where it's set may well provide a very large number of students who will go on to do degrees, who will go on to do masters after that, and actually bolster what you referred to earlier as being potential lack of numbers that we're starting to face some years within academia. But that's where I'm coming to here. So work gives you practical experience, work gives you real world application. It almost gives you the art of how to apply your knowledge. But academia, and I can speak from first-hand experience of going through the degree route, academia does actually give you a very, very strong base in critical thinking and theoretical grounding. These are very important aspects of what we do. We solve problems every day. We have to critically analyse, think, break them down, apply theory, solve the problem. So one without the other is just, it's lost. So we very much realised when trying to design this apprenticeship, we had to be very cognizant of the need for both and a good balance of both in order to produce the very best people. But also, and again, more theft. The industry diversity. Lindsay's Wheel of Acoustics. I actually stumbled upon this in the UCAN report, and it was great because it's what we all know. Acoustics is a broad church. There's a lot out there to do, and sometimes almost reading this, I was just looking at all the things I wish I was doing, only sitting in one or maybe flipping into another one of those little areas. I thought, God, there's a lot of cool stuff out there. I wish I had the time to do it all, but what that means actually is there's a lot of areas where people can go and work, and that's an obvious thing to say here, but possibly not to somebody who's either trying to change careers or in their teens. they maybe don't realise that the very things in their ears were designed by people, one of whom was an acoustician. They just imagine it works. So that right there is another reason to bring about some form of work-based learning where they can actually engage. Now, we also have, dare I say it, an EDI issue, equality, diversity and inclusivity potential issue in acoustics. Over the course of time, diversity has been a challenge and it's trying to be addressed, but how do you address diversity? I don't know. All I'm saying here is that there is a potential, the more people you bring in from an early point in their career, or the more you open up acoustics to people who may not have considered it as a career, the more chance you have of improving diversity, the more chance you have of having interesting ideas introduced into the industry from lots of different backgrounds. We have to remember diversity isn't just the obvious things that we all think about. It can also sit with who can afford to go to university, or who is even in that frame of mind of wanting to learn in that way. Maybe we're losing out on a lot of very good people who don't learn through pure academia and actually need something like this. So again, these are not silver bullets. These are just thoughts towards what the benefits of apprenticeships can be. So in summary, a benefit for an apprentice, well, pretty obvious really. You get a job. You get the ability to earn money. You get a potential career path. You get a qualification. Now the qualification where we've set it is equivalent to a foundation level degree. We were very conscious that there are degree programs in the UK, or in England, sorry, I have to say apprenticeships do only apply in England at the moment. There are degree programs here. They're very, very, very good degree programs, and actually what they need are people. So maybe the best place to put this was before people actually do their degree, and then they get turned on to it, they get their qualification, they're set on a path. But there's also another aspect, which is more about self-esteem in the industry. I remember getting my first registration with the IOA, and that meant a lot to me as a young person. Having that sense of belonging amongst a group of people who also are interested in what I'm interested in. And that's quite big. I think it's bigger than actually we perhaps sometimes give it credit for. As well, we're aligning the learning and the work that's going to be done with the Eng Tech side of things. So we're trying to get a path into professional registration here as well. The idea being that if you can start people into this path, hope is they'll stay there. With numbers as well, our industry becomes more prevalent. So it's a self-fulfilling prophecy in many ways. Some of us in this room are employers, I'm guessing, worrying about numbers, worrying about budget sheets. Used to be an engineer once upon a time, but now some of us maybe all we do is worry about where the money's going to come from. Well, there is a obvious financial benefit for employers. They're taking advantage of the levy. There's an allowance of £11,000 that the government has deemed to be the right amount to educate. And that £11,000 is clawed back through the levy. So if you don't pay the levy, even better, because you're able to take advantage of some government subsidy to educate people. There's also an element of social value. Social value is talked about quite a lot nowadays in companies, in bidding, and these sorts of things. But do we really know what it is, what it means? Well, that's effectively, it's about, what do we do to give people opportunity and provide a level of social sustainability? Giving people careers and jobs. That's a clear benefit to a company to be able to talk about these things. But actually, again, the symbiance of that is that people get those jobs. So that's a really important factor there. And also future planning, boosting your workforce, boosting the people you have, and getting the opportunity to train them in how you do things from a very young age. Or indeed, if they're changing career. I have to stress, this isn't just for people who are of 16, 17, 18. This is for people, anyone who wants to come into it. So quick summary of key facts. Again, using the map inverted in the hope that no one would notice it was taken from the report. I can't lie to the future dean at UCL. So key facts is a level 4. If anyone knows what level 4 is, what it effectively means is it's a foundation degree. With that, you can enter into a full degree program after you've finished. It's 24 months in duration. It is part-time, so it wouldn't be a rapid whiz through. You'll be working on it for 24 months while you're learning. There's 11 grand funding from the government, which isn't anything to be sniffed at when you're trying to get people through education. A minimum of 20% of the time needs to be spent in school, if you like. So that does not mean, however, that employers shouldn't be training people in work. Have I got a couple of minutes left? Oh, sorry, I was beeping. I think we're well overrun now. The assessment doesn't actually take in an exam. You might find that slightly strange, but an apprentice perhaps is best placed to demonstrate what they've done and how they've done it through presenting the work they've done, presenting a specific project report, and also presenting a portfolio of the work they've done over 2 years. That shows our view on this one was that exams are sometimes learnt for and then forgotten about, whereas this method actually encourages a retention of knowledge, encourages softer skills like presenting, like how do you get your idea across to other people in a clear and succinct way. We have at least one provider on board, and that's London South Bank University. Thank you, Steve, for all of the contributions you and your team have done. No problem. How many glasses is that? No, and at the minute we're still in between whether it will be block or day release. This really depends on the numbers. A lot of places would carry day release, but that would be very difficult to do if you don't have the numbers. So we'll come on to how we can solve that problem. But in the first year, it may be that this is a block release program. For those who don't know what that is, that's basically people go to London South Bank in this case for blocked periods of time through the year. My personal preference would be day release. I think that regular topping up of knowledge is probably a good way for cognitive retention, but we have to make sure there are numbers there in the first place. We have the IOA on board as endpoint assessors, so thank you to the IOA. That's brilliant. We have the right people assessing the right things, and we have the Institute for Apprenticeships as our external quality assurance, who will make sure the IOA are doing it right and according to the process. And we also have links ongoing for Engineering Council registration. We're talking with the engineering representative in the IOA, and that is getting moved through in terms of registration. Remember, in 2 years' time, that's when all of this will come. So what we need to do now is start getting people into this. It has, after all, been 3 years already since the whole idea was floated. Final slide. So what next? Well, we need you. We need people in the industry to get involved, to, much like with the STEM, it doesn't happen just from one person with a megaphone. It happens through a groundswell of people and discussion and word of mouth. And also ask us questions. Don't be afraid to send questions in. We're trying to develop FAQs. I'm not an educator per se. I'm a mechanical engineer who became an acoustician who's worked in acoustics for 15 years. I knew nothing about the education industry, if you like, before starting on this, and I've learned a hell of a lot, but I will hopefully be able to find out more if people have questions from a practical perspective, perhaps. How do I do this? How do I get an apprentice? Well, that's a job application. So that's where we would love to know what you want in an apprentice, so we can help write those job applications. Those job descriptions, what you're looking for, and also just employ an apprentice. We have several apprentices across civil and structural engineering and building services within BDP, and they're all flying, having a brilliant time doing a career that they can actually see a long-term passion for, and are, like I said before, gaining a CV that's envious. So we're having our launch event on the 21st of January 2020 at ACOM's offices in the large town hall space there. If you're interested in coming along, either give me a business card or leave your name on a piece of paper, or we'll get something going. speak to me in the pub, however you want to do it. We will get an industry-wide invite out, and we really hope you can come along for this journey. Just as a final point of note, it may not be apprenticeships may not be apprenticeships in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years time, depending on which government has come along and rebranded it. I think what we need to remember is what we have developed is a foundation upon which we can build, and as long as we don't forget that, and instead of putting it in the apprenticeships box, we actually have a genuine future within this zone of people who are being educated. Thank you very much.